Hello and welcome to this week's Quoted for Truth. I'm your host, John Davison. With me is Brandon Sinclair and Tom Mc Shea. This week's show is a little bit different. We're still going to be discussing the week's news, but we are not live for a very good reason, is that it's E3 in a week and change. And all of our live video technology is currently being put into boxes and piled into a truck so that it can drive down to LA from San Francisco. So we're doing this live to tape. Same format. We're going to go through the big stories of the week. We've crawled through the comments that you guys have made on those stories, and we're going to be talking about those. And we're going to kick off with the first story this week, that the Bungie Activision contract, which calls for their new game Destiny as soon as next year. So when Bungie signed its partnership with Activision, they committed to 4 games and 4 pieces of DLC in 8 years. With the first set release exclusively on Xbox 360 and its successor in 2013. And a PlayStation 3 version of the game would be planned to follow in 2014.
Okay, I still can't figure out what the biggest news here is. Because we're getting an unprecedented look at a contract between the biggest publisher in the industry and one of the biggest developers in the industry.
And it wasn't even revealed because of that.
No, it was in the Infinity Ward lawsuit with Activision. And I have no idea how they possibly... this just seems like somehow the Infinity Ward guys managed in the discovery process to make some kind of half-assed argument as to why this was totally relevant to their case and needed to be made public. Just out of spite.
It's the ultimate troll from Weston Zempella. It doesn't have any relation because they're talking about their internal contract versus Bungie's third-party one, so they just wanted to get it out there and make everybody angry, which is kind of awesome.
Either they or their lawyers have the best PR people in the business, because everything is all about just trolling the hell out of Activision right now.
Yeah, we have an interview up right now with the legal team for Weston Zampella, who just everyone else is like, we don't comment on pending legal matters.
And they're like, what do you want to know?
Legal matters? Yeah, let's talk. Let's riff. Come on. Those guys are total jerkbags. And just, we went to Activision and it's like, hey, do you guys want to, fight back here?
Yeah.
We're kind of pummeling you.
So,
and it's like, no, we will pass.
So Dogman7 in the comments says that he thinks it's kind of messed up that this was revealed because of a court case that isn't related to Bungie in any way. I wonder how the Bungie guys feel about this. They're going to be kind of cheesed off about it.
Well, their official statement on their website was just stuff happened, I guess stay tuned with us. And it was a nice kind of meek way to acknowledge that it exists without because they're actually one of the best developers, Rockstar, maybe a couple others, of slowly leaking information. So this kind of just blows up their whole strategy, because we now know for the next 8 years what they're going to do and when they're going to do it.
Yeah, a massively multiplayer style.
Science fantasy.
Yes, my favorite genre, science fantasy.
So that's like
shooter.
magic, but it's believable, right?
It's techno mages.
Ooh.
Nothing but techno mages everywhere.
Okay.
And I'm already actually kind of bored of this whole series.
I know, it's
just
weird.
because I know that we're getting annual installments. There's 4 proper ones every other year. So in odd years, 2013, 15, 17, 19?
Yes.
Oh, God, that's a long time.
So we know about the games, but we also know about the DLC in between. I mean,
right.
What do you think about that?
DLC add-ons and even-numbered years.
I mean, this is the first time that a game franchise has been milked before it's been officially revealed. And it's leave it up to Activision, because I'm totally already bored of this. You don't think
it's kind of like the World of Warcraft fell into, in the where the big expansion packs are kind of keeping it going.
It's a similar cycle. I don't think this is going to be an MMO. I mean, it's a massively multiplayer shooter, but I don't think we're going to see PlanetSide.
Right.
That seems a little bit too...
honestly was the first. I mean, there haven't been many successful MMO shooters. I mean,
yeah. I assume it'll be different. Also, these don't work on consoles. Right. And the first one is going to be on the 360, so unless you're Final Fantasy 11, which was kind of a success. So I think they're going to be a different model from WoW, I'm guessing, and it's not going to be like Titan either.
Chromehounds?
Closer to Chromehounds is what I imagine. It's interesting on a conceptual level, but I don't know if we need another shooter like this, another sci-fi shooter.
There was a lot of that in the comments, like Movie Quest 14, yet another shooter, no thanks. Other people speculating that if anyone could push it through, then maybe Bungie could. Killer 2401 says, will Bungie be the studio to finally push an MMO through the console barrier? I mean, people have tried. I mean, Huxley looked promising earlier on, although it never happened.
Movie Quest 14, yet another shooter. No thanks. The market's already oversaturated with them. We could go 2 more generations without another first-person shooter, and the market would still be oversaturated.
Wow. See, I mean, I
with them.
disagree because there's still the occasional shooter that's really good and worth playing, but it's so hard at this point because we've seen so much in so small time frame that it's going to be tough for even someone as talented as Bungie and as good at marketing as Activision to get people to really care.
The most interesting shooters that come out are almost inevitably like terrible as shooters. Like Turning Point, Legendary the box. So they were like Legendary was mythical creatures in modern day New York City, which was like, hey, that's interesting. That's something different. And Turning Point was alternate history, like what if we lost World War II or something, right?
Yeah. What if Winston Churchill was killed by a taxi cab?
Oh, okay.
There we go.
For real? That was
Yeah.
it? Wow. So, Oviru, if I'm pronouncing that right, the first Destiny game is highly developed, and already there are plans to make 4 of these games over the next 8 years with DLC in between. Wasn't the original point of DLC to add content to an existing game after they've been released, to prolong interest in the games after the stuff on the disc got old? Apparently that whole idea changed pretty quickly to, okay, boys, let's charge idiotic gamers an additional $10 or $20 for a few more hours of gameplay. Do you think this is a really cynical,
I think that is
upfront
completely
approach?
true. We have the value of what a gaming dollar buys has been destroyed in this generation, and like what makes a whole game has also been destroyed. And it's like I'd like the idea of Bungie like planning a complete game, and if it's really good, maybe they can make a sequel. If it's really good, maybe like an expansion pack. And if it needs this, but why are you planning this stuff and just make a complete game the first time around? I guess we didn't really need that back in the day.
That's an antiquated notion, and we are now cranky old men yelling at the kids to get off our lawn.
What about this non-antiquated notion? What if you make an online heavy game, and then give me free updates for the next year or two, like Minecraft and Terraria, which are brand new business model ways to do games that are successful and people love and are really good?
Yeah.
Why do I have to pay for this stuff every other year when it's been proven you can make money the other way?
Well, if Activision did it, you would be angry at them for charging $20 for a beta version of a game that's completely unfinished and will be. The perspective is a huge part of this because there's, there are things that Notch can get away with and Mojang can that Activision can't.
Yes. Well, I mean, with Minecraft, you can buy it after it came out. Like that's fine. You had the option beforehand. But I mean, this model has already been established. Why are we still accepting this idea that I have to pay money for extra content? If the smallest developers in the world can do it, Terraria's 3 or 4 people, why can't the biggest? And that's a big problem, I think, and it's going to be tough for me to swallow that in the future.
Money. Because to be the big company, you need to charge more money.
Yes.
I mean, so one thing that did come out in this is that this game is also for a next generation of consoles, which gives us a nice segue into our next story, which is David Cage, who's the Quantic Dream founder, the guy behind Heavy Rain on PS3, said that the next gen is not needed until 2017.
Okay, wait, one second, real quick, just to really hammer home the point about not knowing what the top story was with that last one. We didn't even talk about it being Xbox 360 exclusive for a year.
Oh,
yeah.
When was the last time there was a third-party exclusive like that?
Yeah, but
Activision dabbles in it, and like you get a lot of. The first DLC pack will be exclusive for 3 months.
I was actually going to say, well, what if a Sony developer did this? But then we have the new Insomniac game that I'm blanking on, Overstrike.
Yeah.
It's on both systems, so there goes my argument. So yeah, it is kind of strange.
So next gen, I'm
Hey,
sorry.
next gen, not needed until 2017. David Cage says, I'm not that interested in technology for the next generation of consoles. If we could continue with PS3 for another 5 years, it would be fine with me. And then he goes on to say that the limitation is not hardware, but the lack of creativity. So it was a bit of a diss on everybody, really.
Yeah, but the thing that interests me about this is that it's a statement, like this story got a ton of comments, over 1,000 of them, because people feel strongly about this one way or the other. Like Trollkind wrote, especially with all the bullcrap already about the next gen, with always online, no physical media, and other marketing shams they'll think of to make it a worse consumer experience. I'll be happy to use the coming years to play the huge backlog of great games I didn't have time for yet. And that's sort of like, I completely, like, I agree with Trollkind there. Like, as much as shiny new graphics are really great, every trend in the industry right now, just kind of, when I extrapolate it to another generation, it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to see that just yet.
But Cliff says you want Avatar.
Hey, Cliff wants to sell me stuff. Cliff has an interest in it.
So Tack Sniper kind of takes that idea and this is what the sentiment that came from a lot of people. He said, "Have you seen a gaming PC lately? It simply destroys anything the current gen consoles can put out. They're needed much sooner than 2017." I mean, he sort of touches on something that the current generation is underpowered, but I think the bigger story is actually that the PC is really thriving right now. I think a lot of people are coming out of the woodwork saying, "Look, just game on PC. It's not that expensive either.
I know.
To get a decent rig now."
Mm-hmm.
I know. I think one of the more interesting comments I saw was Fiscal Deal, because he basically said what I say, where next-gen consoles bring with them new IPs. Because I made that argument on another Quoted for Truth. But it's kind of sad that it's gotten to the point where you need new hardware for new IPs. Like, why can't they just
reset the clock, right?
Why can't they just be creative now? I mean, I think David Crane was talking about how everything is about combat and and it's like, why can't we just forget about what we know about games for a second and just look at it from a different angle? And that's right. We don't need a new system if we're going to do that, but it feels like we need a new system because nobody wants to do that.
I think part of it's when people make investments in new IP, they're like, okay, so we're going to spend a lot of money on this. It's a risk up front because what if people hate it? But we'll be able to churn out sequels with that same engine for the next 4 years. And if you're doing it at the tail end of a console cycle, it's like, well, we're going to need to make a new engine or vastly improve this one to make the first sequel on the next generation.
That's true. I mean, my first reaction with Halo 4 is, why don't you make this whole trilogy for the next generation? So, I mean, I understand their point of view with that, but I guess it's just... like, that's why PC gaming and even mobile gaming, which I don't do as much.
But to be fair, on the IP front, I mean, he's partnered with Sony really closely with Heavy Rain, and Sony are still being much bolder with this. I mean, you know, the Last of Us is coming. They're going to show it in a big way at E3. It's a new IP late in the cycle. It's doing some interesting stuff. I mean, like, it's still happening, but I think you're right. There's this sort of need for there to be a reset point where, like, okay, it's okay to try something new for a little while.
And we actually just had one of those with Kinect and Move. When they came out, the number of new IPs, especially from Microsoft and Sony, skyrocketed. Like, unlike anything else this generation, even the first years of the 360 and the PS3. And you can wince at that and say, oh my God, that's awful. But those are the conditions that make for new IP. Here's something brand new interface. People, you can't adapt Uncharted to that, so you have to do something like that.
It's a really good point. But it's like, if you look at the other models, the Vita and the 3DS also launched without great new IPs. And is it just because you can make standard games on those, so they're just being made? Is that it? Because the DS was so different at the time. It's like, we got to do something crazy to get people interested, but now it's
touch
3D.
The magic.
Go
on, touch it.
Feel the magic.
Sorry.
So what do you think about his sort of blanket statement? Not needed. Why 2017? I mean, like, that's what, 11 years of 360.
Yeah, I think that might be when Sony is finally ready to invest enough money into another generation of
He
hardware.
has some knowledge that we don't.
I mean, really, like, what we have right now, you're starting to hit the diminishing returns line where we can make fancier boxes, but how much are the developers really limited with the concepts that they have? It seems like a lot of them they would still be able to do on the current generation. They just haven't really wanted to do anything beyond.
Well, David, he talked about this specifically. There's no limitation he has found on the PS3. And when you factor in the Move, the system is like, no one's going to tap the potential of that system. So we don't need one from a technology standpoint.
So this is interesting. One of the things that a lot of people are commenting on, more so than the actual merits of his position, were Cage himself. Parker82 said, "If David Cage made a game more than once a decade, I would care more about his views. He can be as cynical as he wants, but he can't change the industry if his studio never comes out with games. And the problem isn't first-person shooters, it's that everyone keeps making Call of Duty clones. Shooters used to be the spear of innovation a decade ago." Do you think, does the fact that Cage has turned out so few games, does that actually detract from his...
No, I attack the message, not the messenger, and I think the message is right here.
It doesn't matter that he's basically, whether it's 2017 or 2013, his next game is probably targeting the next generation anyways.
His standpoint is he looks at the industry and it is devoid of creativity, and then he looks at his internal studio and they cannot push the PS3 to its limit. So when he looks at these two things, he says, we don't need a next gen. The developers just have to push themselves right now. as opposed to like Epic. We need something mind-blowing next generation. It's like,
So
just
from
make
his
something good now.
perspective, if you have a new generation right now, developers don't need to be creative because they can just be, let's make it prettier.
Yeah, but historically that hasn't happened as much. You get the new IPs in the beginning of the next generation. So I think he's completely true, and it doesn't matter who says it. It's right.
All right, moving on. Our next story, Street Fighter 25th anniversary set will drop in September. $150 on 360 and PS3. You will get Street Fighter Cross Tekken and Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, as well as movies, a Ryu statue, and belt.
The statue lights up.
It lights up.
Yeah.
For some reason.
An art book, and get this, 11 discs of Street Fighter soundtrack.
One for every version of Street Fighter 2.
Oh, da-da-da.
So, I mean, you got to... It's good that they are celebrating their anniversary with something. I mean, it's shocking that there's so much, particularly this year, there are a lot of notable... We've had Video Game History Month all the way through May. We've had a Fallout 15th anniversary. We've had the Wolfenstein 25th anniversary this year. There's a Zelda 25th. There's not many people outside of like tweeting, "Hey, we got an anniversary this year. Let's like all click like on our Facebook page." No one's really done much to celebrate it. So, I mean, for me, kudos to Capcom for actually noticing that their audience has a passion for this stuff, right?
Do you think that they noticed that the Street Fighter started before the earliest game is Street Fighter Third Strike, and all these games are next generation games that are available for the 360 and PS3? Did they notice that it started before Third Strike?
Well, they got to sell you something, Tom.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's like, they noticed it, but they noticed more that their fans would be willing to pay money for something
150
like this. Right. So
American
the
buck
thing is, like,
monies.
just looking at it from a content point of view, if you don't have any of this stuff, then that's like $150 for these two full games, just Street Fighter X Tekken with the DLC and Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade with the DLC, and then the movies, the anime series, the soundtrack. Like, there's a ton of stuff in there, and it's actually a good value. But the problem is, it's all like there was no effort put into it. You know, it's just, what did we have lying around? And then they put, and I really hate to do this because it's absolutely absurd considering we're talking about a video game with like colorful stereotypes from the world pummeling each other. But that Ryu statue in there is so tacky.
Oh, God.
It lights up.
Tacky.
I think it's cool that it lights up.
And
that's what I want in my statues.
It's absurd to me that I'm even applying that word to something in the world of video games. But
when I go statue shopping, I always ask the clerk if it lights up or not. So I like this. So I mean, if you compare this to other things, I mean, last year Nintendo did a tour for Zelda where they played the music, and I think there's like a soundtrack in Skyward Sword.
Yeah.
And then for the Mario one, they did 4 ROM dumps in a red box.
yeah, embarrassing.
So neither of those were. I mean, Capcom is doing better than Nintendo, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of a disgrace that there's not more. I mean, they're not really celebrating the history of this franchise. There should be Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter Alpha. Like, there should be a collection of games in this.
Auction Sniper commented, I might have considered getting it. It had a compilation of some of the currently unavailable titles. Street Fighter 1, the Alpha Zero games, the EX series, and the first 2 games from Street Fighter
I know.
3. Which is like, this is what I really want to see in this industry, is someone that actually cares enough about their series to do a proper retrospective.
It doesn't seem very curated. It just seems very
not at all.
opportunistic.
And Tekken?
Right? Yeah.
Street Fighter versus Tekken? Like, of all the games, it's like, okay.
If I buy a box set of music from like one of my favorite artists, it's going to have the hits.
Yeah.
But it's also going to have studio outtakes, live performances, bootleg recordings, things like that. What I want from video games is something that gives me some sense of the creative process. I want to see the early builds of the game.
Right.
The ones that are janky and unfinished, that kind of, just show you one snapshot of where the game was. It's barely playable, vertical slice, anything, just crap like that. I don't care if it crashes on my computer. You might have to do this on PC because of cert for the consoles, but just give me an unfiltered look at the creative process behind the game. Because right now, no one is doing that.
Right.
No one has done that. Even Valve, which is like the gold standard with their commentary tracks for their games. It's like, we need more.
There's a lot of cynicism around Capcom right now, and I think Mustaine 13 summarized it like, despite Capcom's recent shady business practices with the on-disc DLC stuff, which I think is still poisoning the world with people, Street Fighter has been a big part of my gaming life for the past 25 years, so I'm definitely buying it. I think it is a franchise that people feel deeply enough about that.
It's sad that when they say I'm going to buy it, it's done with a sense of resignation.
Right, yeah.
It's like,
But also, it just feels like, just because I've read, I mean, a lot of people are really excited about this, and it seems like they care more about Street Fighter than Capcom does. That they have an emotional connection, and Capcom has a monetary connection, and it kind of shows through with these products sometimes.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wish they would embrace what Street Fighter is and how important it really is.
All right.
Peter Brown wrote a really good editorial about this. He is very passionate on this subject, and he likes Street Fighter maybe as much as anyone I've ever met. So that should be on the site right now, and I advise you read it.
Is he going to buy it? Did he say?
He's I get the sense that he's not going to buy it.
A little grumpy about it?
Just a little.
All right, switching gears. Shadow of the Colossus, game we all love very much. There's going to be a movie, in case you didn't know. And the people making the movie have signed on Josh Trank, who you may or may not have heard of. He was the director that is responsible for the movie Chronicle, which is actually quite a clever superhero movie if you've not seen it. Chronicle came out last year, right?
Earlier this year.
Earlier this year,
Yeah,
okay.
it was in that like Oscar dead season when everything gets released as absolute crap, and it
And
was
it's kind of
easier for a superhero movie without a comic attached to
Yeah.
kind of.
So it was a superhero movie, but kind of a sort of grungy. It was all shot as though it was shot by the people in the movie with a handheld camera. So it was it was sort of a bit Blair Witchy, but more modern. So there's a lot of heat around him, but he will be doing a Shadow of the Colossus movie, apparently. He's also signed on to do a bunch of other stuff. He's doing the Fantastic Four reboot, because apparently we do one of those already. And he's also doing a Venom movie.
Spider-Man's
But
Nemesis.
Shadow of the Colossus is a movie. Do you think it's going to work?
Well, the commenters sure didn't. I mean, Hulu Gamuga, who I really just wanted to say his username, says the biggest issue is they'll have to give it a plot. Do you guys think that like there's enough of a plot to
Do we
the
need to know
game?
why there are monsters?
I don't. Well, plot's not important. That's one
Okay,
part.
so if you imagine it's a very literal translation in the movie, it's the dude brings the woman, gets told, kill these 16 colossi, and then I'll bring her back. And then, like, is the next, 80 minutes just him slaughtering
Well, I think it has to
16
be
colossi? And
3.5 hour movie, right? It's got to be.
Well, I can speedrun that in 4.5 hours, so we'll see if he does. No, but it's. I mean, it's not going to be.
Is it just like there has to be more character growth and more
There has to.
dialogue and stuff like that?
I mean, I totally
Unless
agree
this
with
is
you.
like totally experimental, like crazy film dogma kind of thing that they get into here, which I would kind of love.
Do you think the studio's missing? Sorry, I'm cutting you off there, but do you think the studio's missing the point? So Chubby said, Shadow of the Colossus shouldn't be remade. It's a work of art that is suited to the video game medium. I mean, like, that was what was clever about it, right? It was the fact that it was interactive was sort of what made it special.
I think this can work as a movie, though. I mean,
Yeah?
it's all about somebody killing, kind of nice creatures for the most part for someone he loves, and then the impact it has on your soul, on your being when you do something like that. And I think you can do that really well in a movie format, just as well as a game format.
It's the twist. It's the juxtaposition of, oh my god, this is so awesome, look at him kill that thing, followed by the realization of like, well, you're really just kind of a dick here. You're going after all these things and slaughtering them mercilessly, and they never did anything to you. And that's something that films do really well, actually, is make you feel that, even if it's totally unintentional.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking of Rambo, where they would
That was a good movie.
the newest one.
That was a good movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Totally good movie.
1 minute they're showing villagers being forced to run through a field of landmines, and the violence is like Saving Private Ryan style, horrible slow-mo, and you're just like, oh, that's so horrific. And then 5 minutes later, he's like shooting a dude's head off with a bow and arrow, and everyone in the theater is supposed to cheer at it. Yeah. And you can like feel that they're trying to bring both these emotions in there, but you mash them up next to each other, and you just sit there like, man, what the hell is going on here? And I love that. And that's something that a Shadow of the Colossus movie could absolutely pull off, I think.
Oh, there we go. Shadow of the Colossus,
At its
like
best,
Rambo.
it could be like Rambo.
I can't believe that you're actually for this. I thought that I'd be alone with this. I'm like genuinely excited. I hope it goes through because we've seen what Gore Verbinski was signed on for BioShock, and that doesn't look like it'll happen.
Well, it's also if something like this happens and it succeeds, I think it can convey to the world of outside games, people that aren't gamers.
Right.
It can convey to them like, yeah, this is the sort of this is the sort of story that games can tell.
Yeah,
And
we need that moment that comic books went through years and years ago, where people were like, okay, it's not just silly; it's actually trying to say something.
Yeah, and it's also just, not everyone can play games. Like, if the barrier for entry to play games is higher, because you need actual skill to play this. But if people can have a similar experience from an emotional standpoint in the movie theater, they could have more respect for what this medium is capable of, I think.
Shadow of the Colossus has already appeared in a movie as a very effective plot element as well. And
Love Reign Over Me.
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And the sort of the metaphor of him playing it was like so effective that there's already material for them to kind of.
I know. I'm really excited. I hope it gets a budget, but this is not a movie that actually needs a huge budget because you can do fancy camera work to make it seem bigger than it is.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to work. I think it's going to succeed, and I'm glad that they signed on some people who know what they're doing.
Sticking loosely with a movie kind of thing, I'm going to massacre this guy's name now. Shadow of the Dam director Massimo Guarini, I say, with a question mark on the end. Do you think that's the way to pronounce it? I don't know, but you're both refusing to say. You want to go with that?
Leaving you out to dry on this
and he has an independent studio, which also has an unpronounceable name.
God.
Ovo Sonico.
At least that's a made-up word.
At least that's a made-up word. So you can't. So they announced this week that they are beginning work on their first game, which is described as a movie-length game. So presumably a couple hours long. They've not really said much about it, but Massimo Guarini said, "All I can say is that what I want is to craft memorable experiences. There's so much more to be explored besides throwaway iPhone games and 40-hour-long traditional productions. I think the best way for us to achieve our vision is to provide a rich emotional experience packaged in a movie-length time frame."
I love it.
You like it?
I love it. The more people step away from viewing games as an equation, how many hours of entertainment do I get versus how much money do I put into it, the more they step away from viewing it like a product, the more they put into viewing it as art, as a creative endeavor.
Well, Oda Katinam, I don't know, he's a user. He said, yeah, right, I'm going to pay full price for a game that lasts 118 minutes.
I don't think that we're going to be...
It's probably not going to be full price.
Yeah.
But
he did say it would be possibly at a reasonable price. And I think that might be English as a second language.
If you can do
kind of
a
thing.
movie-length game for the price of a movie ticket,
That's
perfectly
we've seen
reasonable.
Journey, for instance. But I guess it's like there are a lot of games, and I won't name names. There's a lot of games that are bloated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of games that have a lot of filler. There's a lot of games that make me bored for long stretches. And that is like an appeal to people. They talk about how they sunk 30 hours into this game, and they're going to sink 30 hours more, and they didn't pull. Like, people talk about this as a good thing, and I think it's actually a bad thing when a game is like that because it's very rare that a game can have 40 hours of good content.
Yeah,
it's almost not possible when you think about it. So I strongly disagree with this user. I like the idea of a game that is as long as it needs to be with no padding and try something different from an emotional perspective other than like boyhood violent fantasy type
like
thing.
Battle LA.
No.
Wow.
No. Like Journey would be where I would go because
Yes.
Journey is a fantastic game. And it doesn't matter how long a game is. I don't know how long I played Journey, but it has
Right.
stayed with me.
And if it's a good experience, it's one that you might want to replay just for the joy of going through that experience again.
Just like you rewatch a movie. Like it's not like a finite thing. It exists and you can play it over again. I don't know. I don't understand why people are so down on this because that seems like the growing sentiment of people who play games is they want length, they want girth, they want a lot of content.
Except when they don't. I mean, like the comments on this were all over the place. There were people that were complaining about bloating games, and meanwhile there were other people that Journey and Flower came up a lot. LMAO Carrots said, if it's anything like Journey or Flower, it'll be one of the best games ever made. Length should be the last thing taken into account when reviewing games. Games like Shadow of the Colossus, Eco, Journey, and Flower are short, but endlessly amazing the entire time and some of the greatest games ever. Some
I totally
games
agree.
Are,
I mean,
nodding.
there's something like $60 for Vanquish. It doesn't have multiplayer. The single player is 5 hours,
Yes.
and it's one of the best games I've played, and it is... And I've played
Yes.
it multiple times, and it stayed with me, and there's so many shooters that I've forgotten or never picked up the multiplayer. So that should be the model, is Vanquish. The other games that just tack on stuff should not be the model. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm more willing to buy games like this than other people, but it's like my money, it's like I want my time to be well served.
Yeah.
There's a lot of blowback on this, I think, just because so many big frontline $60 games have sort of flirted with how short can we make that experience.
Yeah.
PC Rules says, I thought that was going to be another Call of Duty news post when I saw the words movie-length game.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So I think people are already kind of like primed against the idea, but I don't know who was against Journey or against the idea of Journey when they heard it. So this is sort of thing where if they don't talk about it in terms of the concept and they just show the game and what they're doing with it, people will catch on and they will accept it, I think.
Hopefully.
So before we go, we did want to add, just as we went into the studio to record this, some news was starting to break about 38 Studios, which we've talked about on previous episodes. Brendan, you were following what was happening with there, but it sounds like the whole studio is gone now, right?
Yeah, layoffs, company-wide layoffs. They sent a memo to everyone saying it is a company-wide layoff. So if you were to put a number on the layoffs, it is one, but that one is the entire company.
Everyone.
Yeah, and then right after that story broke, the governor of Rhode Island held a press conference because Rhode Island loaned them $75 million to move to the state. And he was like, I hadn't heard anything about any layoffs.
Oh, boy.
Also, that Amalur game, that game was a failure. He just like flat out said that game was a failure. The game was a failure.
Well, this is
And he quantified failure as well, right?
He said it needed 3 million sales. It needed to sell 3 million copies just to break even. And last night, Kurt Schilling tweeted and posted on his Facebook that it sold, I think he said 1.2 million.
Yeah.
And that beat EA's expectations for the game. So
it's sad when a game can sell 1.2 million and be a failure. Like we shouldn't be at that point. That should be a huge success.
Yeah.
Well, it's not, and now you have a company with no employees and an IP and a half-made MMO that they will now try and look to sell to someone else in order to pay back.
Well, and the sad thing is that the whole thing is broken up. I mean, like Big Huge Games is rolled into all of this as well. That that if they're broken up, not spun off. I mean, I'm
just glad they got Kingdoms of Amalur out the door because when THQ continued having problems earlier, Big Huge Games was their studio and their project Amalur basically was in jeopardy then, and 38 Studios had to come in and be the white knight and pick them up.
Yeah.
So I mean, I doubt that's going to happen here, but 38 Studios Big Huge is obviously a very, very talented developer.
And a big shift from the news, the tail end of last week, that the MMO was still on track and happening.
In June?
June next year, right?
Something crazy?
Yeah, and last night they released the first screenshots of characters in the game, and it has this interesting art style for the MMO. So.
But, I mean, it's all still rumor at this point, but as those screenshots were being posted, people were walking out the door.
Yeah,
so
can't
depressing.
blame them. I mean, people at 38 have probably seen the writing on the wall for a little while.
Yeah.
But
so this story will no doubt continue to develop throughout the weekend, so keep an eye on the site for that. But that is it for this week's show. Bit of a change up in format, but we will be back. I'm looking at our producer right now. We're going to be back next week, right? Right here. We're going to be, I say with a question mark on the end. Right before we go to E3, we'll do one more of these, and then we will have live shows every day of E3. We have the press conferences ahead of time. The Monday of E3, which is the week of June 4th, there will be four press conferences live on that Monday, starting with Microsoft, then EA, Ubisoft, and Sony in the evening. Nintendo will be dropping all of their knowledge on Tuesday morning, and then E3 kicks off on the Tuesday of that week.
So Nintendo dropping all their knowledge, was that half an hour?
Oh, come on.
20 minutes?
Come on.
So we will be back. We will be back next week with this format of show, and then from there into E3. So thank you very much. I'm John Davison. Brendan, Tom, thank you. Goodbye.